Logo design is pretty important. For a company's logo to be successful, it needs to know exactly what the brand is, who they're marketing to, and what they're trying to achieve. This is what I like to refer to as the Triforce of logo design that opens up the door to the sacred realm where the FedEx logo is. My God, that's a good logo. Because in this day and age of social media, brand image is everything. If you're gonna be out there on the internet for the whole world to see, this should probably not be your logo. So, throughout history, and by history I mean like the last 50 years, we've seen all sorts of horrible brand decisions made by all sorts of kinds of things of companies. The Verizon logos, the downfall of the Firefox brand, the Cleveland Browns. Did they really just put an orange football helmet and call it their logo, man? What the f***? These are just a few examples of companies who have the right idea and definitely have the skills and the resources to make a decent logo. Well, maybe not the Cleveland Browns, but clearly something or someone got in the way. And this sort of thing could happen a lot in companies. I mean, personally, I know from experience, whenever you're designing something for a client, you better be damn sure that you can back up what you're doing, because sometimes the client will just come back along and say something like, "Maybe we should use papyrus." Now, in my last couple of Jacob videos about logos, we took a look at some examples of what the video game industry had to offer, and let me tell you, it was a wild ride. Being over 40 years old now, video games have cemented themselves into our culture and are starting to experience back pain a little bit because they're getting old. And they're now considered to be the most profitable form of entertainment. Now, because of this, games are given much higher budgets, clearer art direction, and more fleshed out marketing campaigns than ever before. Now, for someone like me, video games have had a pretty huge impact on my life. It's what's got me so interested in art, and I probably wouldn't be a graphic designer today had it not been for some of the incredible design skills from all the boys and girls over at companies like Rockstar Games and Nintendo and Namco Bandai. The Galaga logo's hot! Game consoles in particular have had an interesting time marketing themselves, to put it lightly. Let's take a look at the large, woolly, mammoth-sized spectrum of design here. You got your staples like the Xbox 360 logo. Classic, gets the job done, Grandma approves of that one. And then we got the weird scrunch text from the Virtual Boy logo that only your weird Uncle Jeff likes because it makes him think of the times before his wife left him. I'm actually really sorry if you have a divorced uncle named Jeff that you like, maybe I should just shut up. The point is, there's a whole buttload of game systems out there and a whole buttload of logos to go along with it. So, I'd like to take you all on a journey with me for however many minutes long this video ends up being. In terms of marketing, the 90s was a very colorful, and let's just say, weird as butt decade. Now, since logos took a big old nosedive headfirst into the toilet in this time period, one can assume that this caught up to Nintendo. Oh God, it's so bad! The original Game Boy logo just had this sense of like classicness about it. It's short, it's to the point, tilts the text to the right so you know it's getting a little playful. And the logos that followed it just added more character to it. You got the Game Boy Pocket. This was Nintendo's first real iteration to the Game Boy line because it made it smaller, a little slimmer, a little more portable, so naturally, the logo reflected that. And then Japan got the Game Boy Light, which was like a slight revision to the Game Boy line, and it added a backlight to it, and it was awesome. So the logo reflected that. The Game Boy Color logo looks like it handed a notebook to a 5-year-old and said, "Do your worst, Sally." What happened here, Nintendo? You had such a good thing going with these clean, beautiful, thoughtful logos that advertise the systems wonderfully, and now you have this thing that doesn't even use name brand Comic Sans. It uses off-brand Comic Sans. Now look, I get it. This was being marketed at kids. I'm sure they wanted to use a custom font that was supposed to represent like the liveliness of color in the human mind. But did you have to use that font? Like, we got a billion fonts out there, and this is the one that Nintendo settled on. That makes sense. Now, because the other Game Boy logos had such straight and rigid and like uppercase typefaces, I understand that they wanted to bring a little wackiness in for this one to show off the color capabilities, but in my opinion, you could have achieved that with like a cool brush script font or something. Something more like this to symbolize that, hey, we're breaking out of this shell and we're taking this shit into the future, man. The layout for the Game Boy Color logo is especially interesting because there's actually two different ones. Like, you have the main one for the system that I've been showing you that thinks children must not be able to read the word color, so they made it 3 times the size of the Game Boy. And then you have this alternate version that's more similar to the other Game Boy logos. Let's just say there was no need for that first one to exist. Now, whenever people think of the word Sega, usually 2 things come to mind: Broken Promises and Sonic the Hedgehog. And guess what? The Master System has both. The Sega Master System was Sega's first real attempt at going after some of the video game market. Now sure, they had a couple of failed systems like the SG-1000 and the SG-1002. Gee, I'm having a hard time figuring out why those weren't marketable. So whenever creating the Sega Mark III, they ended up redesigning it and they eventually turned it into the third complete failure for Sega. And I'm sure the logo had nothing to do with that! This is a perfect example of what not to do with a logo.
Daisy Girl, we gonna talk about kerning? We're gonna talk about kerning.
Kerning is the spacing between letters in a typeface, and I may or may not have explained this in one of my other videos about logos, but frankly, I don't feel like going back and looking to see if I did. But regardless, the kerning on this bitch is just terrible. Everything is just awkwardly touching each other. Like, it feels like a middle school dance because some of the letters are just gently touching, and some are close but not actually touching. Some are just getting real friendly up in here, like, hey, why? You gotta calm down a little bit. I know you like being jammed between some S's, but sometimes we gotta back it up a little bit and make room for Jesus, you know what I mean? There's two artistic reasons why I think Sega just failed this generation. One of them is probably the design choice for their box art to look like a 4th grade math assignment that a child drew on, but maybe it's also the fact that the logo for the game system looks like they're trying to sell me a typewriter. For some weird reason, Sega used a serif typeface whenever designing this logo, and I really don't know why.
Hey, slow down, buttface. What's serif mean?
So there's two main types of typefaces: serif
Bingo!
and sans serif. Serif typefaces are things like Baskerville, Times New Roman, Courier New, you know, the things that they got the little feetsies. These types of fonts are great for things like books and magazines because they help the text flow better whenever you're trying to read it and they want you to feel a little calmer and immersed into the type. Sans serif typefaces are things like Impact, Futura, Helvetica. These are all straight up and down and they're bold and a lot harsher. It's because of this that these types of fonts are a lot more commanding and they serve to really grab the viewer's attention, and that's why you don't see people use fonts like Bleeding Cowboys on their thumbnails, because that would be social suicide. Thank you, Regina George. Now the reason I just explained all that is because Sega chose to use a serif typeface to advertise their product, which was a terrible idea. Not because it's like impossible to use that type of font for a piece of tech, but for a game system in the 80s, that doesn't breed the idea of fun, which is probably what you actually want people to think of whenever they think of your video game system, not the dictionary. So back in the prehistoric days of gaming, aka the 1970s, video games were in their ugly, diaper-filled toddler years. We had things like the Intellivision, the Atari Video Computer System, otherwise known as 2600. But most importantly, we had the grandpappy of them all, the Magnavox Odyssey. The Odyssey has gone down in history as the first video game system, having released in 1972, and as you can tell, was state-of-the-art as f***. The Odyssey actually did a lot to revolutionize the games industry. It brought the concept of video games into the home for so many people with such classic gems like Cat and Mouse, Ski, and my personal favorite, Wipeout.
Wait a minute, there's no sound?
Now the logo for the Magnavox Odyssey, it's not anything special. If I had to describe it quickly, I'd say it's just a product of its time, and that's fine. It functionally works for the console and it didn't need to be anything crazy. It just needed to have mass appeal and attract a broad audience. The Magnavox Odyssey 2's logo, however, is a raging dumpster fire full of screaming cats and children. Whenever you're making a logo for something, you generally want that logo to somewhat match the product that you're selling. Take, for instance, Apple's logo. It's elegant and simple, just like their products. Or look at Burger King's new logo, which was basically their logo that they used up until 1999. Gone is the excitement of the old logo with its fun primary color scheme and personality. Now they're just trying to copy everyone else, so I guess that actually does fit in with their brand. This logo kind of looks like it was the animation for an old commercial and it just stopped midway and some artist was like,
It's beautiful!
This logo bugs the crap out of me because as a piece of art, like as something to look at, I think it's actually kind of interesting. But as a logo, oh god, no, it's terrible. It just doesn't comfortably fit anywhere. Like, I'm trying to imagine this on something like a billboard or like a brochure or something, but it just awkwardly takes up too much space, but at the same time, doesn't have enough of a commanding presence? And what the hell is that gradient? It looks like when a high schooler first learns to use Photoshop and slaps a gradient overlay on a CD cover that they're designing for their friend's band. And I would know, because I did that. This logo, in my opinion, conceptually is so close. Like, they had something here. They had a perfectly acceptable start of a logo with the original Odyssey, and in my opinion, All they really had to do was use the same placement of the two and simplify the gradient a little so it doesn't look like I'm gonna blast into the sun whenever I turn it on. And then you can always slap a line through the bottom third of the logo for some added flair and to further symbolize that this ain't your grandpa's Odyssey no more. Boom. Now you got a logo that has the structural similarities to the console itself, creates more of a brand identity to the first Odyssey, and isn't burning grandma's retinas when she goes to buy you one for Christmas in 1977. So the APF Imagination Machine was this combination of both a video game console and a home computer that released in 1979 for $599, which when adjusted for inflation brings this beast of a machine to around $2,300. Now, the reason I mention this is because this is the logo that they picked to market this thing. Like a team of people sat around a table, they looked at this and said, yeah, that's good enough. Hey babe, do we have any tile at all? Originally I had this long, drawn out explanation of why this logo is completely horrific with its rainbow gradient from hell and outer glow, but then I realized it kinda just speaks for itself, doesn't it? Daisy, look. See, even she doesn't want it and she tries to eat poop. Sony has pretty much dominated the console market ever since their inception of their baby in 1994, the PlayStation 1. And for the record, I was also a baby inception in 1994, so that was a pretty good year. The PlayStation 1 logo is so good. So good, in fact, that it looks like Nintendo actually took a little inspiration from it with the N64 logo. I don't know. After the PlayStation 1, Sony decided to mix it up a little bit with their follow-up, the PlayStation 2. Now this logo looks like it stepped right out of the future with a glass of vodka and said, hey, what's up, man? And I always loved how sharp and angular and confident this logo looks. It's one of the few logos that actually has a gradient in it that I really, really like. And I think that's because they stuck with a simple analogous color scheme with purple transitioning to blue, rather than using all the colors that the human eye is capable of seeing. So after the PlayStation 2, Sony decided to move forward with the PlayStation 3 logo and use, and I kid you not, the Spider-Man font. So whenever that failed, they decided to make this logo instead. It's boring as butt. Now before I go any further, yes, I understand why they did this. It's probably because the PS3 was failing to sell well and they needed to change its visual identity, and since that type of marketing worked for the PS2, they decided to make something really similar. And then they did it 2 more times. The PlayStation 5, Sony's weirdest looking system that they've ever created, and they couldn't come up with something better than this. This, everyone, is the product of minimalism. As a graphic designer myself, I do want to clarify that creating a minimal look for your brand is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it's actually a really good thing. And the reason why that's a good thing is because minimal logos are easier to remember. They're more versatile, they're more timeless. Whenever grandma's driving down the road, why do I keep using grandma and grandpa? Whenever Billy's driving down the road here and he notices a sign for soda, he's probably gonna be a lot more likely to remember this than that. And this is why most large companies go with a logo like this that's a lot more minimal, because it just works across various mediums like t-shirts or social media icons or something. That being said though, how about we mix up the fucking formula a little bit here, Sony? Like, this logo is fine. It works. It functions for what Sony is wanting to do, which is to sell you consoles that have the letters PS and 5 on it. So on that front, it's a perfectly acceptable logo. That being said, it's still boring and lifeless. Say what you want about Microsoft's naming conventions, I mean, I sure have. Like, my god, the Series X is a horrible name. But at least this logo is trying to be something different. I didn't say it was great, but at least it's different. The PS5 logo is interesting in that visually, it doesn't really represent this thing at all to me, but yet, it perfectly represents Sony's strategy towards gaming consoles. Add more power, yet just do the same thing over and over again. Now to me, I mean, this is just my opinion, but this logo just has no personality. Like, it doesn't look like it's going to represent something that's gonna give me hours upon hours of enjoyment. Kinda like the original PlayStation logo. It just looks like a logo for a washing machine I'd find 10 minutes down the road at the Home Depot. But you know, it doesn't look like a washing machine? Raycon. No, I'm just kidding, I don't have a sponsorship. Good girl. Your butt's about to fall off, sweetie. Oh, that doesn't look comfy at all. Are you okay? Yeah. Yeah. So, You know, I just felt like talking about some logos, and I don't think Daisy wants to hang around here anymore. So I guess I'll let her go. I hope that someone I hope that someone out there learned something about logos or graphic design or something from this slightly over-dramatic 27-year-old talking about nonsense.